morning to everyone. It's nice to be here once again. Today I'm going to be, if I can get the thing to work, today I'm going to be looking at actual EVs used on the roads in Malaysia. There's an awful lot of talk about electric vehicles and technologies that are going to come and how they're going to be used, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what I want to look at today is how they're actually used in this market in Malaysia. And when people think about electric vehicles, very often they're thinking about Tesla or something like this. And what you're going to see is there's a lot of electric vehicles on the road. Just coming in today from Tanjung Malim, we saw one of them driving down the road. And it was not a Tesla. Okay, so this survey was performed by Miros. I did some of the surveying independently up in the north end. We did some together. A lot of the surveys took place down in the Kuala Lumpur area. So Mr. Azhar is here from Miros today, so you can discuss some of this with him a little bit later on. The survey was intending to gather a whole bunch of data because essentially we know there's a lot of electric vehicles on the road. We just don't have a lot of information about them, specifically how they're used, who's buying them, why, are there accidents, et cetera, et cetera. So we were looking at several different pieces of information, demographics, how they're used and by whom, the vehicles themselves, performance parameters and whatnot, but also looking back at accidents and then other problems and complaints associated with them. You can see here, this is one of the Miros folks interviewing somebody in front of their electric vehicle. This is another photograph from some of the surveying that was going on. We had 124 interviewers, people that we interviewed for this. So the number one thing that I wanted to show is that 100% of them are small electric two-wheelers. There was not a single Tesla that we saw on the road ever. I think there's only like 2 in the country, and they're owned by MGTC or something like that. And everybody's afraid to drive them because they're expensive. So these again are a bunch of photos of the various electric vehicles that are on the roads. When people say EVs, people still think of cars, even though what you actually see out there is essentially bikes. So again, you can see here is kids riding this thing, no helmets, certainly no driver's license. I doubt he's insured. Flip-flops, et cetera, et cetera. These are just around my neighborhood. So they're extremely popular. They're very low power, very low speed. Brands, right? We have Malaysian manufacturers of some of these vehicles. And how many of them did we see on the road? None. What we saw was Zhongqi and Chongtu and blah, blah, blah. 100% of them were Chinese vehicles. The previous speaker had made a point, a very important point, about government funding of projects and grants versus real live R&D and industry. And what do we see? There's a lot of manufacturers that try to build these sort of vehicles, but generally they're grant-consuming boondoggles. A boondoggle means lebih kurang tipu. So, so yes, there are Malaysian manufacturers of these sorts of vehicles, but really what they're doing is they're consuming your tax money. Okay, when we looked at what is the purpose, why do people buy these vehicles? I mean, what do you expect to see? A lot of it is for going shopping. A lot of it is for going to work. A number of them were for sending kids to school. Now, a lot of people are buying these vehicles for their kids to go to school, so they don't have to drive them. A surprising number of the drivers, this is backwards. Most of the drivers were Malaysians, but something around 15% were foreigners. Why are 15% of the electric vehicle drivers foreigners? Because the police don't hassle them if they're driving the electric scooter. They don't need a license or anything like that, according to the guys who are driving these, right? License versus no license. About half of them had no license. So you can see that these vehicles are being used on the road by unlicensed drivers. That's a potential issue. Male versus female. This is an interesting statistic too. In the survey in the Kuala Lumpur area, it was predominantly men who were the drivers. In the rural regions and in the small towns, it was predominantly women. It was like 95% female drivers. The one we saw on the road this morning was a female driver. Also, predominantly, they're little old ladies, they're grandmas. Income, generally we're looking at kind of the lower end income, people below 3,000 ringgits per month. 3,000 ringgits is reasonable pay, but most of the people using these vehicles are low end. That's why we didn't see a lot of Teslas in this group. In town usage versus in rural areas, small towns, kampung area. So kebanyakan dia pakai dekat kampung. It's a very convenient vehicle to go out to the kebun. You're not potong getah. You want to drop your kid off at school. There's some use in town centers, but there's also some problems associated with using these in town centers, and we'll see more about that. That comes out of this survey as well. Why is it difficult for a poor urbanite to use an electric vehicle? Well, where's he going to charge the thing? You know, in the kampung, yeah, you just charge it at your house. But if you're living in a flat, if you try to charge it out here, your charger's gone, right? It gets rained on and you get electrocuted. So, you know, you boleh pilih how you want to die. So this is a lot of the user demographics, and in some cases you see a huge spread. I hope this is big enough to where you can read it. The age of the users were from 17 to 72, quite a wide range of ages, average 40. How long have they been using an electric vehicle? From as little as 2 months to as many as 15 years. Some of these little old ladies, they were on their third or fourth bike. So they buy it, they run it and run it, run it. When it dies, they get another one. Average ownership is about 4 years, which is also the average lifetime of these small vehicles. Typical usage between 2 to 7 days a week, averaging basically every day. So on average, people ride them every day. They're only going 33 kilometers per week. On a conventional motorcycle, people average 30 kilometers per day. So what you see is these electric vehicles are not going anywhere near as far as a conventional motorcycle. They're used for very short trips. EV was the main transport of almost all of the people using them, and almost all of them said they would get another EV when this one dies. Okay, what about the vehicle performance? The cost. The cheapest one was 400 ringgits, but that was only because it was a second-hand model. The most expensive ones were only up at around 2,000 ringgits, so still relatively inexpensive. The battery lifetime, which is a key issue, the batteries only last between 2 to 4 years on average. Replacing the battery cost between 300 and 500 ringgits. And as was mentioned, the battery cost is a very significant portion of the vehicle cost. If I've got a 1,500 ringgit vehicle with a 500 ringgit battery, 1/3 of the cost of the vehicle is the battery, right? And if you have to replace it every 2 years, you have to pay for 50% of your vehicle every 2 years. It winds up being an expensive vehicle in the end. Speeds, relatively low speed. The typical speed is about 30 kph. The max speed was only about 60 kph, and that was only on a few of the higher performance bikes. They usually charge about 4 times per week and have a full charge range of about 30 kilometers. But remember, they're only driving about 30 kilometers per week, so a range of, say, 40 kilometers is just fine. Accidents, right? This research was being done by Miros, and they were very interested in accident statistics. There was only 8 accidents out of all of these users that we surveyed. Single vehicle crashes were 2/3 of them, or 3/4. One quarter was they were rear-ended, and then there were some statistics on locations. Now, we can also look further into this and say, how safe or how dangerous are these vehicles? So what I did is I said, well, 124 people times 30 kilometers per week, 50 works per year, 4 years on average, that's 800,000 kilometers. In 800,000 kilometers, we had 8 accidents. That's about 1 crash per 100,000 kilometers. Now, the statistics are very low here. We had a very small sample size, but this is approximately the accident rate that you would see on a motorcycle as well. So these small electric vehicles crash at about the same rate that motorcycles crash at. Now, that's an important factor because they're uninsured, they don't usually wear helmets, and they're driven by unlicensed riders. The complaints, now we're getting sort of towards the end of the survey. The number one complaint was the life expectancy of the battery and the cost to replace the batteries, because the vehicle may last 8 years or something like that, but the batteries have to replace every 2, maybe 4 years. There were some other issues. Some of them complained the tires were expensive because they're non-standard. Maybe the brakes on a lot of them are very poor. But remember, these are extremely low cost and in some cases very low quality vehicles. And so they're not going to have really good, long-lasting things. We had worn out front forks and head tubes and et cetera, et cetera. So overall low quality on a lot of these vehicles. Getting back to the battery lifespan, some of the numbers from the survey jive really nicely with numbers from research. What we saw is they were claiming the batteries would only last for a couple of years. This is a life cycle versus depth of discharge. If you completely discharge a lead acid battery, it will only last maybe 100 over cycles. Well, that's about 1 year's worth of usage. If you discharge it only halfway before you charge it up, you don't discharge it completely, it'll last a lot longer. And it turns out it'll last something on the order of about 2 years, which is about what they're lasting, which means most riders are charging them back reasonably well. Again, the range of the vehicle is 40 kilometers, and they only do 30 kilometers per week, and they charge it several times per week. So they're actually doing a reasonable job of keeping it charged up. But even then, the batteries still only last for maybe 2 to 4 years. Again, the most popular vehicle type in the north end is the scooter, and in the cities it was more something between these two, more like a moped, pseudo-bicycle type vehicle. There are high-performance electric motorcycles. You'll notice KFC delivery bikes. They use electric bikes built here in Malaysia by a company called ICLIMO. ICLIMO also uses the batteries after they're too old to use in the vehicle. They use them in other products as well. But they're only used by KFC delivery. I haven't seen one used by an individual owner. Again, to reiterate, there's a lot of old people and a lot of young people riding these vehicles. A lot of unlicensed people driving these vehicles. This is sort of a basic comparison of electric bicycle, electric motorcycle, and a conventional bike. And it's got some information on the cost and the range and the charging. What I really want to do is look at sort of an economic analysis from two points of view. If you have an electric two-wheeler versus a conventional motorcycle, this is the purchase price, this is maybe the annual range. Remember, they're going 30 kilometers per week, so they only have maybe 1,600 kilometers per year. On a conventional bike, people drive much larger distances, so maybe they go 5,000 kilometers per year. This is your fuel cost per year. So this is your electricity cost for recharging this guy, and this is your fuel cost for the motorbike. And you say, okay, well, the electric two-wheeler is a little bit cheaper. But the vehicle only lasts for maybe 4 years until the battery is exhausted. So if you look at the lifetime cost of the vehicle, the cost per year of the electric two-wheeler and the standard motorcycle are almost the same. So in the end, the electric two-wheeler is not really significantly cheaper than a conventional vehicle. If you look at the cost per kilometer, the electric two-wheeler is more expensive than a conventional vehicle because the electric vehicle doesn't last very long. So a lot of people think, oh, electric vehicles, they're very cheap. They're very cheap to run. the ones that we see on the road are actually significantly more expensive to operate because the batteries wear out so quickly and need to be replaced. If you include the battery cost, then it's more expensive to operate. Here's an analysis showing an electric two-wheeler plus a single battery change. And also with a motorcycle, you have to include some maintenance. So when you include those numbers, okay, now the cost per kilometer is getting closer and closer. The cost per year of the electric vehicle is now significantly cheaper. So the thing to remember here is be careful with your assumptions. You can get different results depending on what assumptions you make in these sort of modeling, economic models like this. One thing I do want to reiterate is these electric two-wheelers are much, much more efficient than internal combustion engines. If you have a car and 6 guys, it's actually less energy intensive to put 6 guys on 6 motorbikes than 6 guys in one car. If you had 10 guys, okay, stick the 10 guys in one car. Now remember, everybody's calling these zero-emission vehicles, but that electricity has to come from somewhere. And if you plug in here, it's coming from a coal-fired power plant over by Lumut, which puts out a lot of CO2. So when somebody says it's a zero-emission vehicle, you just got to shake your head and laugh a little bit. Now, it's kind of a shame they're not used more in urban settings, because if you have a city plan like this and you have transportation hubs, these electric two-wheelers make perfect first-mile, last-mile links to a transportation network where you can get from one hub to another hub. Like when I come out here, I ride my motorbike, a conventional one, to the train station, and then I could get off at Tanjung Malim, which is really quite close to here. So it's a very efficient commute. So we just have 2 pages of conclusions very briefly. Electric two-wheelers are exceptionally efficient. That didn't really come out of the survey, but I just wanted to reiterate. They are very, very efficient vehicles. They're cheaper to own per year, but maybe more expensive per kilometer than conventional vehicles because of the battery cost. They are disproportionately preferred by old, young, and poor people. They have a very successful niche here in Malaysia. Why are electric vehicles not used more in the world in general? Because they're competing head-to-head with conventional vehicles. The conventional vehicles are already entrenched. They have existing infrastructure. Everybody knows them. The reason the small electric two-wheelers are succeeding is they have a unique niche. They're low power, low cost, low speed, and so they're not going head-to-head against the conventional motorcycles. So EVs that compete directly with internal combustion engine vehicles, they have a very hard time competing. Finally, battery life and cost are the #1 complaint of almost every EV owner because that's what's making it more costly to operate. The class of vehicles often uses very light, or I would say low quality components. These 2 issues are addressed by standards. It's important to have good vehicle standards and enforce them. We have standards for this class of vehicle, but the vehicles on the road have not been through that standards process, and so they have a lot of low quality things running around on the road. Finally, unlicensed, uninsured riders are certainly a potential problem. The accident rate is similar to conventional motorcycles, and so what we see here is a need for JPJ regulations that are clear and enforced. Fortunately, we have a member from JPJ who will be joining us in the panel discussion a little bit later, so you guys can razz him about that a little bit. With that, I would like to conclude with one last announcement. We're actually looking for graduates from Polytechs because we're expanding and we need more technicians and engineers and people doing production in this very fascinating world of engines and vehicle development. With that, I believe my time is up. Thank you very much.